Hey everyone, my name is Lizzie, and today we'll be talking about how to make sure your homemade alcohol tastes delicious. So we're going to talk about yeast. One of the secrets of home brewing is that a major part of your flavoring comes from the yeast. So initially what I would use was turbo yeast, and I have a little sachet right here. These were from my humble beginnings when it was the main type of yeast that I would find on Amazon. And I would offer classes, and one person in the comments I would remember, he said, oh, she's using turbo yeast. So let me just impart my knowledge upon these newbies. And honestly, I thought, what's wrong with turbo yeast? I heard that there was off flavors, but I didn't taste any off flavors. It's only after a couple of batches that I noticed what they were talking about. So the off flavors, it basically adds a sort of bitterness to your alcohol that you don't necessarily want. Although I would say that the benefits of turbo yeast is that it produces your alcohol quick because it includes yeast nutrients inside the package. So that's what I started from. Then when I noticed this off flavor topic, I switched to daddy yeast. I have another pack right here. This is a hefty pack of daddy yeast. And the first word in daddy yeast, it says distillers, active dry yeast. And I do not distill. I just ferment because distilling is illegal where I'm from, and I want to abide by the laws. So I do not have a still, and it also costs $300 or more. There's also possibilities to make a still, but I'm not that adventurous. If you know how to make a still, by the way, comment below and let me know if it's easy to do. Can I just use pots and pans and a little cord? I'd be interested to know if a regular Joe can create this on their own. So I continued with daddy yeast, and well, I also bought wine yeast because I was curious. I just wanted to buy all the type of yeast that I could. And this is what I stuck with, the EC 1118. Here it is. Here it is. I don't know if you see that. And that's what I use now. But because I use a wine yeast, it affects the taste of the alcohol. So the alcohol tastes more like wine or cider. And that's normal because it's influenced by the type of yeast I use. And the reason why there are different yeast sachets are that different yeast yield different alcohol percentages. And they usually go up to 20% when you're fermenting. If you want to go above 20%, that's when you would use a still, and that's when you would make these strong alcohols that go up to 30, 40, or even higher percentage. But I'm sticking with the fermentation process, and for now, the yeast that I use is the last one I showed, the EC 1118, and I can tell you that all the different batches of alcohol that I've used based on the different yeast have tastes completely different. So you can use exactly the same amount of sugar, exactly the same amount of water, and the different yeast, and it's going to change the whole taste of your alcohol. So that's number one in what influences your flavor. Number two is the sugar that I use. So some people might have noticed that I don't only use sugar, but I also add molasses. And molasses are what a lot of rum makers use for their rum and then distill that alcohol. So I use molasses because it adds a little sweetness to your alcohol. And I've mentioned in past videos that when you add more sugar, it means more alcohol. It doesn't mean more sweetness. But in molasses, yeast has a hard time eating all the sweetness of molasses. So it does eat a portion of the sugar, but there's some residual sweetness when you use molasses. And I prefer my alcohol a little on the sweeter side versus the dry side, but you can always adjust this based on your recipe. And my old recipe used to be 50% sugar and 50% molasses. And I would make my friends try it, and they would all be polite, let's say, on their reaction. So they would say, it's delicious, but there was an aftertaste or it was too sweet. How do I know this? Because now when I give them my new recipe, now they're like, oh, okay, it's actually good now. So I can say that my recipe has changed, and you get through this process by trial and error. But if you want to avoid the trial and error, I have classes below that you can attend, and I'll give you my recipe on the exact amount of molasses I use, the exact amount of sugar that I use, of water that I use, because I'm here to help the community. So if you want to know more about these classes, there's a link in the description below, and you can book a class online or in person. So about these molasses, actually one day I was running out of molasses and there was just a little layer at the bottom of the cardboard, and I added it into the pot of ingredients because I wanted to add what was left of the box. And little did I know this was the best recipe I've ever had. So I've had confirmation that this was one of my best batches. And since then, I've changed my recipe to reduce the amount of molasses in my ingredients. Now I just put a little pinch, a little smither of molasses. I don't put 50% molasses because the taste was too strong. And usually what rum makers do when they distill, it purifies your alcohol, so it strips all these strong flavors. It even strips the colors, so the molasses taste will disappear. But since I'm only fermenting, these molasses taste would still be present in the drink. Therefore, I reduced the amount of molasses. If you'd rather have alcohol that's more dry, there's not a problem. You could still use the same ingredients, but just decrease the molasses or decrease the amount of sugar by a bit. So first thing that influences taste is the yeast you use. The second is the sugar that you use and the amount. And the third thing that influences your alcohol taste is water. Why water? Because if you don't put enough water, then there's going to be too much sugar in your wash, and the yeast will have so much sugar to eat that it'll get stressed because there's too many options, there's too much to do. And when yeast gets stressed, that's when off flavors arise. So you want to make sure that there's enough water to give energy to the yeast, to make it flow seamlessly and grab the sugar here and there and eat the sugar to transform it into alcohol and CO2. So if you found this video valuable, share with a friend. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.